Smith, 99.5 won't do. Troy Smith, 99.5 won't do.
Recently, as I walked through my living room, I saw the picture of someone very special from my childhood. Although normally I would just walk on by, on this particular day, the picture brought forth a wave of emotions that brought back fond memories of my childhood. Fellow Toastmasters, guests, or anyone who has ever gotten emotional just by looking at a photograph. Who is the special person in your picture frame? The special person in my picture is my grandmother, Neva Mae. And in this picture taken in the 1940s, she's wearing black formal wear with a string of pearls around her neck, looking so elegant. My most memorable experience with my grandmother occurred 30 years later, when I was 7 years old, and we had an opportunity to travel from Newark, New Jersey to Goldsboro, North Carolina. I'll never forget the night before the trip. My grandmother had prepared some of my favorite dishes that included fried chicken, pimento and cheese sandwiches, and her signature pineapple coconut cake. I will never forget the evening of the trip on that cool summer evening as we stood at the Greyhound bus stop. My grandmother looked into my eyes, smiled, and touched my face. And in that moment, I knew that I was loved. During the course of the trip, I had a wonderful opportunity to learn more about my family history. You see, my family was among those African Americans who had migrated from the South to the North during the 1930s and 40s. My grandmother, Neva Mae, had been an excellent student who had high aspirations, but she also lived in the South during the Great Depression and during an era that was oppressive. Due to financial pressures, my grandmother was forced to leave school early in order to help support her family. Although this experience broke her heart, it did not break her spirits because Neva Mae was such a resilient woman. And she had such a strong work ethic. So whether she worked in the fields of the South or in the factories of the North, Neva Mae always gave her best. And she passed on this legacy of hard work to her son and to her daughter, my mom. As I looked at the photograph, I could see the determination as well as the tenderness in her eyes. And I could remember the many struggles and sacrifices that she made. Thought about the fact that she lost her beloved husband, my Grandpa Jack, much too soon. And I asked the question, how could she be so positive when she faced so many challenges in her life? The answer to that question brought me back to a bittersweet memory of my childhood. You see, my parents divorced when I was 4 years old. Therefore, my mother had to work a lot of extra hours. She also went to school full time. I missed my mom during those times, but I always had Neva Mae to rely on, because she was my rock. I'll never forget the overnight visit. My grandmother woke up at 5:30 that next morning, and she began with her prayer, and she read her Bible scriptures. Then she lifted her voice in song, and she said, Lord, I'm running, trying to get 100, because 99.5 won't do. That song captures the essence of Neva Mae. It was her faith. It was her faith that gave us that tremendous capacity to love and that wonderful determination. I shared with you that my grandmother made an educational sacrifice to support her family. Could you imagine how proud she was when her daughter, her namesake, Neva Smith, graduated with a bachelor's degree in business administration with distinction? Then, years later, she lived to see her grandson, Troy Smith, graduate with his master's degree from Harvard University. I say this because her earlier sacrifices and her example of hard work laid the foundation for our success. And for that reason, we stand upon her shoulders. While we were achieving our dreams in the North, my grandmother had a dream that took her heart towards the South. My grandmother always wanted to go back and retire in North Carolina. And as a little boy, I can remember looking at the blueprints with her. Troy, that's going to be your room right there. Can we make my room blue? Troy, you're something else. I'm happy to share with you, friends, that in 1984, my grandmother achieved her dream, and she was able to move into her new custom-built house in Snow Hill, North Carolina. She was able to enjoy 15 years of independent living. Most of those years were good years. But in 1998, I returned to North Carolina to face an enemy, Alzheimer's disease. I saw Alzheimer's disease rob my grandmother of her mental and physical vigor. There were times that she did not remember who I was. I can remember that last week of the visit. My mother and I had taken her to the doctor's office, and I was sick with worry. I believe that my grandmother sensed that, because on the other side of the room, as the nurse escorted her into the examining room, my grandmother looked at me, smiled. She winked. In the midst of her health crisis, she was telling me, honey, I'm going to be all right. I'll never forget the last day of the trip as I packed my car to prepare to return to Massachusetts. I moved slowly because I did not want to leave my grandmother alone. I'll never forget the warmth of our hug. And once again, my grandmother looked me in the eyes, smiled, and touched me in my face. And in that moment, I knew how much I was loved. Who is that special person in your picture frame? If they are still alive, let them know how much you love them. But if they have departed, know that they are still with you, just as Neva Mae is with me.